Hey guys, tonight we are going to travel to Japan, but we're not going to the neon-drenched streets of Tokyo or the glittering courts of the emperors. We're going somewhere much quieter, much stiller. We're going to explore the birth of one of the most famously serene rituals in the world, the Japanese tea ceremony. But here's the thing, it didn't start out serene at all. There were no silk kimonos, no hushed whispers over a perfectly crafted suite. It started as a bitter jolt of caffeine for monks who just really needed to stay awake. Honestly, you'd probably spit out the first version. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Your support truly means the world. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. Then let's ease into tonight's journey together. The air is cold and damp, carrying the scent of old wood, wet moss, and the faintest hint of incense. You are kneeling on a dark, polished wooden floor that feels like cool stone beneath your knees. Your robe is coarse, simple, and dyed red, earthy brown. Outside, a soft rain is falling, a steady, rhythmic drumming on the roof tiles that seems to be the only sound in the universe. You are in a Zen monastery in the mountains near Kyoto, sometime around the 12th century. Your whole world is this room, this cushion, this moment. Your task is simple: to sit, to practice zazen, to follow your breath and still your mind. But there is an enemy, a gentle, insidious enemy that creeps in through the stillness sleep. Your eyelids feel like they are weighted with stones. Your mind, which should be a placid lake, is drifting into a thick fog of dreams. You know that behind you, the meditation master, the Jiki Jitsu, is watching, holding his flat wooden stick, the Kyosaku, ready to deliver a sharp, stinging slap to the shoulders of any monk who loses his battle with consciousness. Just as your head begins to nod, a bell rings softly, signaling a short break. You and your fellow monks rise stiffly, your legs protesting. An older monk at the front of the hall moves with quiet purpose. He is preparing a remedy. He doesn't unwrap delicate paper to reveal fragrant, loose tea leaves. He produces a dark, hard, compressed brick of tea called dancha. This is how he traveled from China, a practical, portable block of pulverized, steamed, and pressed leaves. With a small knife, he scrapes the fine, greenish powder from the brick into a simple, rustic ceramic bowl. He then ladles hot, but not boiling, water from a kettle into the bowl. He picks up a small bamboo whisk, the chasen, and begins to whip the mixture. The sound is a frantic, scratchy whisper. He is not gently stirring. He is vigorously frothing the tea, creating a thick, murky, tea-green liquid with a foamy head, a style of preparation learned directly from the great monasteries of Song-Dynasty China. He brings you a bowl. You accept it with both hands, a gesture of respect for the nourishment it offers. It is not an elegant, finely crazed work of art. It is a simple, functional piece of earthenware, warm against your cold fingers. You lift it to your lips, and the smell is not a delicate perfume. It is the smell of grass, of earth, of bitter herbs. You take a sip. The taste is a shock. It is intensely bitter, with no hint of sweetness. It tastes like drinking the forest floor, a potent, earthy medicine. There is no lingering, no savoring. You drink it down in a few quick, deep gulps, as you would a medicinal tonic. Then, you feel it, not a frantic jolt, like a modern cup of coffee, but a clean, clear wave of energy that seems to wash the fog from your mind. Your thoughts become sharp, focused. Your body feels alert, yet calm. The sleep-minus demons have been banished. When you return to your cushion, your mind is still, your back is straight, and your focus is absolute. This was the true purpose of tea in its earliest days in Japan. It was brought from China by returning Buddhist monks, most famously a monk named Daisai, who saw it not as a beverage for pleasure, but as medicine. He wrote a whole treatise on it, called Drinking Tea for Health, where he extolled its virtues for curing everything from indigestion to fatigue. For monks, its greatest virtue was this: it was a powerful tool to aid in the long, arduous hours of meditation. Historians still debate just how spiritual the initial use of tea was. Was it seen as a sacred herb from the beginning, or was it primarily a functional stimulant, a kind of ancient nootropic? With the profound philosophy of the way of tea being layered on top over the following centuries, the evidence suggests it began as the latter. It was a practical solution to a practical problem. The profound beauty and serenity would come later. This first cup, the one you just drank, was all about function. It was a bitter medicine that held the promise of enlightenment, not in its flavor, but in the clarity it gave you to continue your search for it. Centuries pass. The memory of that bitter, medicinal brew in the cold mountain monastery begins to fade. The practice of drinking tea has escaped the cloister and found a new, very different, and much more glamorous home. You are no longer a humble monk. You are now a high-ranking courtier in the service of the Ashikaga shogunate in Kyoto. The air here is not scented with moss and rain, but with expensive incense and the faint perfume of silk. You are in a grand reception hall called a shogun. Its floors covered with fine, woven tatami mats. Its walls decorated with magnificent painted screens depicting landscapes of misty mountains and ancient pines, scenes from a romanticized, idealized China. Today, the shogun is hosting a tea gathering, but this is nothing like the quiet ritual of the monastery. This is an event. It is a lavish, opulent display of power, wealth, and, most importantly, taste. The focus is not on inner stillness, but on outward magnificence. You are kneeling alongside other powerful samurai lords and courtiers. In the center of the room, on a series of ornate, black-lacquered shelves, is the collection. These are the meibutsu, the famous things. They are a breathtaking array of treasures, almost all of them imported from China at astronomical cost. There are delicate celadon vases from the Song dynasty, priceless painted scrolls, and intricate lacquerware boxes. But the true stars of the show are the tea utensils themselves. The tea is stored in a small, perfect ceramic caddy with a rich, dark brown glaze and a tiny, exquisitely carved ivory lid. The water is heated in a heavy iron kettle of a famous make. But the object of everyone's hushed admiration is the tea bowl. It is a tennoku bowl, a style highly prized by the Japanese elite. Its dark, lustrous glaze is covered in a pattern that looks like oil spots or streaks of hare's fur, a result of the unpredictable magic of the Chinese kilns. It is considered a masterpiece, a perfect object. To own such a bowl is to announce your status to the world. The tea master for the event begins the preparation. He is a professional, a man whose job it is to know the provenance of every object, to handle them with grace, and to prepare the powdered green tea, matcha, with a practiced elegance. The tea itself is of the highest quality, grown in the famous fields of Uji, its flavor less bitter, more refined than the rough tea of the early monks. He prepares a bowl, whips it to a perfect jade-green froth, and presents it to the guest of honor. The guest receives it, admires the bowl at length, comments on its beauty and its famous history, and only then takes a sip. The bowl is then passed among the other guests, each one taking a turn to admire it. The tea is almost an afterthought. The bowl is the hero. This style of tea gathering was called chon-cha. It was a drawing-room tea, deeply rooted in the admiration of Chinese culture, or karamono, the ability to recognize a famous piece, to discourse on its aesthetic merits, to handle it with the proper reverence. This was a crucial social skill for the ruling class. The great debate among historians of tea is whether this opulent, object-obsessed phase was a corruption of the original's end spirit of tea, or a necessary step in its evolution. Was it a frivolous distraction? Or did this intense focus on the beauty of the utensils plant the seed for the later, more introspective focus on aesthetics? The consensus is that it was probably the latter. By learning to see profound beauty in a single, perfect object, the Japanese elite were training their eyes and their minds for the more subtle and difficult beauty they would later discover in imperfection. A fascinating untelling detail of these grand tea parties was the immense value placed on pedigree. An object's worth was determined not just by its own beauty, but by who had owned it before. A simple bamboo scoop could become a priceless treasure if it had once been used by a famous end master. A tea caddy would have its own silk pouch, its own signed wooden box, and sometimes a hold diary documenting its history and previous owners. The object was not just an object, it was a vessel of history, a tangible link to a golden age. As you sit in this magnificent room, surrounded by priceless art and powerful men, you are a world away from the simple monastery. The tea here is a pretext for a cultural performance. It is about connoisseurship, social status, and the worship of perfect, imported things. The quiet, inward journey has been replaced by a very public display. The path to the simple, rustic tea hut of later centuries is still a long way off, and it will require a revolution in thought, a turning away from this glittering, golden world. The gilded tea room of the shogun, with its hushed reverence for Chinese treasures, represents one pole of the tea world. But now, you find yourself in a very different setting, one that is louder, more competitive, and distinctly more Japanese in its energy. The refined and scholarly appreciation of the elite has a boisterous, rowdy cousin. You are in the fortified residence of a powerful regional lord, a daimyo. The room is still large and well minus appointed, but the atmosphere is not one of quiet contemplation. It is charged with a restless, competitive spirit. The men gathered here are not effete courtiers. They are samurai, warriors whose lives are a mix of brutal warfare and periods of intense, restless boredom, and they have found a perfect way to fill that time the tu cha, or tea minus tasting contest. This is not a ceremony. It is a game, a gamble, and a party all rolled into one. The air is thick with the smoke of incense, the scent of sake, and the excited chatter of the participants. Large sums of money, precious swords, and suits of armor are being wagered on the outcome. The rules are simple, but require a discerning palate. The host will prepare several rounds of tea. Some of the tea will be true tea hancha, grown in the most prestigious fields of Ujai, near Kyoto, the acknowledged home of the finest tea in Japan. The other bowls will be filled with other tea hiche, grown in different, plus-minus esteemed regions. Your task, as a participant, is to taste each bowl and correctly identify which is the true, noble tea and which are the commoners. A servant brings you a small lacquered tray with several bowls of freshly whisked matcha. You pick up the first one. You examine the color of the frothy green liquid. You inhale its aroma. You take a sip, rolling it around on your tongue, trying to discern the subtle notes of sweetness, bitterness. Then you marry. Is this the refined, elegant taste of Ujai tea, or something rougher, more provincial? You make your guess, placing a small wooden token on a corresponding tray. The room is filled with the sounds of slurping, considering, and confident or not minus confident pronouncements. At the end of several rounds, the scores are tallied. The winners gloat, collecting their prizes: a fine silk brocade, a new helmet, a purse of gold. The losers groan and order more sake. The two-jaw contest was an incredibly popular pastime in the 14th and 15th centuries. It reflected the competitive, martial spirit of the samurai class. It transformed the quiet, Zen-inspired act of drinking tea into a contest of skill and a display of material wealth. The prizes were often lavish, and the events could last for days, descending into drunken revelry. Historians see the two-cha phenomenon as a critical, yet somewhat unrefined, step in the domestication of tea. The monks drank it for focus. The high nobility of the shoguns court admired it as part of their obsession with Chinese culture. But it was the samurai, through these contests, who truly popularized tea on a wider scale. They made it a part of their social lives. The contests also had the unintended effect of promoting domestic tea production, as different regions began to cultivate their own distinctive teas to compete with the famous UJI standard. The great debate here is about the aesthetics of the tea bowls used. While the shogun's parties centered on perfect, imported Chinese tenmoku bowls, the rough minus and minus stumble world of the two chalk contests may have been a space where domestically produced ceramics first began to be appreciated. A warrior might use a sturdy, simple bow from a local kiln, its value lying not in its pedigree, but in its rugged, unpretentious character. This could be seen as the first faint glimmer of the wabi-sabi aesthetic that would later come to dominate the tea ceremony. A particularly fascinating aspect of the two-cha phenomenon was the sheer excess. Records from the period describe contests, where the main hall was lavishly decorated. The participants wore their most flamboyant clothes, and the prizes included everything from rolls of silk and exotic perfumes to horses and swords. After the tea tasting itself, there would often be a huge banquet with endless cups of sake, poetry contests, and musical performances. It was a world away from the silence of the monastery or the hushed reverence of the shogun. It was tea as pure, competitive, and decadent entertainment. As the party around you grows louder, you take a sip from another bowl of tea. The taste is clean and bright. You know, with certainty, that this is the true tea of UJI. You place your token down with a confident smile. For a moment, you feel the thrill of the game, the pride of a connoisseur. But you can also feel that something is missing. The spirit of the tea itself, the quiet potential for a moment of peace, has been lost amidst the noise and the gambling. The pendulum has swung to an extreme of worldly engagement. For tea to find its true path, it would need to swing back, hard, in the other direction. The noisy, competitive world of the two chalk contests in the glittering, treasure-filled tea rooms of the shoguns could not last. A profound shift was coming, a quiet revolution of the soul that would change the path of tea forever. There was a turning away from the outward, the perfect, and the foreign, and a turning towards the inward, the imperfect, and the local. You are no longer a warrior or a courtier. You are a poet, a scholar, perhaps a minor priest. You have grown weary of the ostentatious displays of the powerful. You seek a different kind of richness, one that is not measured in gold or Chinese ceramics. You are with a man who is one of the pioneers of this new way of thinking. His name is Murata Juko, and he is often called the father of the wabi-cha style of tea. He was a student of Zen, but also a tea master to the shogun. He stood with a foot in both worlds, and he tried to bridge them. He has invited you not to a grand hall, but to a small, unassuming room. It is a humble space, only for minus after tummy mats in size, a space that feels intimate and enclosed. The walls are not covered in gold leaf or magnificent paintings, but with a simple, earthen plaster that is calm and soothing to the eye. The treasures are gone. The shelves of priceless Chinese objects have vanished. Juko tells you his famous philosophy: it is good to see the moon when it is not covered by a cloud. But the sight of the moon shining through a rift in the clouds is, to me, even more beautiful. This single, powerful metaphor is the key to the entire revolution. The perfect, cloudless moon is the flawless Chinese tenmoku bowl, the magnificent, fully displayed treasure. It is beautiful, yes, but its beauty is obvious, complete, and leaves nothing to the imagination. Juko is teaching you to find a deeper, more poignant beauty in the moon that is partially obscured in the object that is quiet, imperfect, suggestive, and humble. He is trying to fuse the spirit of Zen, which finds enlightenment in the everyday and the ordinary, with the aristocratic practice of tea. He is suggesting that the heart of tea should not be about the value of the objects, but about the spiritual state of the host and guest. He prepares a bowl of tea for you. He handles his utensils with a quiet grace, but they are not the famous treasures of the shogun's collection. They are a mix. He might still use a fine Chinese teak addy, but the bowl he hands you is a simple, unassuming one, perhaps from a kiln in nearby Zena. Its surface rough and earthy. The flower arrangement in the corner is not a great, blossoming spray, but a single, perfect camellia in a simple bamboo vase. This new aesthetic was called wabi. The word is famously difficult to translate. It carries connotations of rustic simplicity, of quietness, of an appreciation for the humble and the unadorned. It is the beauty of things that are modest and unassuming. To practice wabi-jaw was to consciously reject the opulent, showy style of the grand tea rooms. The great historical debate surrounding J.U.K.O. and these early reformers is how radical they truly were. Did they completely reject the Chinese-influenced shogun style, or did they simply seek to moderate it? The evidence, found in their letters and recorded teachings, suggests the latter. They were not trying to throw away the priceless treasures, but to change the attitude towards them. They taught that it was a deeper sign of taste to display a humble, rustic Japanese object alongside a single, perfect Chinese one. This chilled and withered aesthetic, as they called it, created a more profound and interesting harmony than a room full of uniformly perfect things. A fascinating detail of this period is the birth of the tea room. The Chaos hits you as a distinct architectural space. Previously, tea was held in existing reception halls, but J.U.K.O. and his followers began to design small, separate structures, often with the feeling of a rustic mountain hermit's hut. They deliberately made these huts small and used simple, natural materials like unfinished wood, bamboo, and earthen plaster. The idea was to create a space that was physically and spiritually separate from the everyday world, a sanctuary where the principles of wabi could be fully experienced. As you sit in this small, quiet room, a profound sense of peace settles over you. The tea in this simple, rustic bowl seems to taste different, more profound, than the tea you drank in the shogun's palace. The absence of distraction allows you to focus on the warmth of the bowl in your hands, the subtle aroma of the steam, the quiet presence of your host. You are not admiring objects. You are sharing a moment. The moon is appearing through the clouds, and you are beginning to see, for the first time, its true, heartbreaking beauty. The seed of the wabi aesthetic, planted by pioneers like J.U.K.O., begins to grow. The search for a new kind of beauty, one that is not dependent on perfection or foreign pedigrees, intensifies. You are now a student of this new way of tea, and your master is about to teach you one of its most profound and challenging lessons. You are gathered with a few fellow students in a small, rustic tea hut. Your master, a follower of J.U.K.O.'s teachings, has been guiding you through the principles of finding beauty in simplicity. Today, he brings out 2 tea bowls and places them side by side on the tatami mat. The first bowl is a masterpiece of Chinese Song dynasty craftsmanship. It is a perfect tenmoku bowl, the kind the shoguns and daimyos would have paid a fortune for. Its shape is perfectly symmetrical. Its dark, lustrous glaze is flawless, with a beautiful oil spot pattern. It is an object of undeniable, breathtaking perfection. It represents the old way of tea. The second bowl is its complete opposite. It is a humble piece of earthenware from a local Japanese kiln, perhaps from Zaina or Shigaraki. Its shape is slightly asymmetrical, as if it slumped a little in the kiln. The clay body is rough, with tiny bits of stone and feldspar visible on its surface. The glaze is uneven, a simple, earthy ash glaze that has run in thick, glassy drips down one side. Then most shockingly, there is a visible flaw, a small, hairline crack near the rim, which has been artfully repaired with gold lacquer. a technique known as kintsugi. Your master prepares a bowl of tea in the perfect Chinese bowl and hands it to the first student. The student receives it with the reverence due to a great treasure. Then, your master prepares a second bowl of tea in the cracked, rustic Japanese bowl. He hands it to you. As you take it, you are struck by the difference. The Chinese bowl was light, delicate, almost ethereal. This bowl is heavy, solid, and earthy. It feels warm and substantial in your hands. You turn it, and the light catches the golden seam of the repair. A river of gold running through the dark, earthen landscape of the glaze. Which of these, your master asks quietly, truly has a heart? This is the central lesson of wabi-cha. Your master is teaching you to see past the obvious, surface minus level beauty of the perfect object and to find a deeper, more resonant beauty in the flawed, humble, and imperfect one. The Chinese bowl is beautiful, but its beauty is cold, distant, and inhuman. The Japanese bowl is also beautiful, but its beauty is warm, approachable, and tells a story. The asymmetry speaks of the natural forces that shaped it in the kiln. The rough texture speaks of the earth it came from, and the golden crack speaks of a history of being used, of being broken, and of being cared for enough to be mended. The flaw does not diminish its beauty. It is the very source of it. This aesthetic, which would later be more fully articulated as wabi-sabi, is one of Japan's most significant contributions to the world of art and philosophy. Wabi, as you've learned it, is about rustic simplicity. Sabi is more difficult to define. It refers to the beauty that comes with age, the patina of time, the lonely, untranquil beauty of things that bear the marks of their own history. A cracked bowl repaired with gold is the perfect embodiment of Sabi. The great historical debate here is about nationalism and taste. Was this turn towards humble, local Japanese ceramics a purely philosophical and aesthetic choice? Or was it also a form of cultural nationalism, a conscious rejection of the overwhelming cultural dominance of China? Many scholars argue it was both, by elevating a rustic Japanese bowl above a perfect Chinese one. The tea masters were not just making an aesthetic statement, they were declaring a form of cultural independence. They were saying, we can find beauty here, in our own soil, in our own imperfect creations. A fascinating example of this is the story of the Edo minas were bowls from Korea. These were simple, rustic bowls used by common farmers in Korea. Japanese tea masters visiting Korea saw them, unstruck by their unpretentious, natural beauty. They began importing them to Japan, where they became some of the most highly prized objects in the wabi-cha world. A bowl that was a throwaway item in its home country became a priceless treasure in Japan because it perfectly embodied this new aesthetic of humble, accidental beauty. The tea masters saw a heart in them that their original users never did. You hold the worn, rustic bowl in your hands. You trace the golden line of the crack with your thumb. You see the story of its life. You take a sip of the tea, and it feels like you are tasting not just the green powder and hot water, but the very earth itself. The perfect Chinese bowl on the other side of the room now seems sterile, lifeless. You are learning to see with new eyes, to find a universe of beauty not in a flawless, distant star, but in a flawed, familiar, and deeply lovable stone. The philosophical seeds of wabi-cha, planted by J.U.K.L. and nurtured by his followers, were about to find their ultimate champion. The disparate threads of Zen philosophy, rustic aesthetics, and the ritual of tea were waiting for a single, powerful figure to weave them together into a complete and coherent tapestry. The time was ripe. The master had arrived. You are now in the bustling, powerful port city of Sakui, a hub of commerce and a center of the new, wealthy, and increasingly cultured merchant class. It is the second half of the 16th century, and you are an aspiring student of tea, seeking out the man whose name is being whispered with awe in every tea gathering. Ariku is not a high-minded born aristocrat or a powerful warrior. He was born into a merchant family in this very city, but through his profound understanding and radical vision, he has become the most influential tea master in all of Japan. He serves as the personal tea master to the most powerful and feared warlords of the age. First Hoden Abugabo, then the great unifier, Toyotomi Hideyoshi. When you are finally granted an audience, you do not meet him in a grand hall. He receives you in a tiny, rustic tea hut, that seems almost shockingly simple. It is a structure of profound and deliberate poverty. The walls are of rough, dark earth. The wooden posts are unplaned, some with the bark still clinging to them. The ceiling is a lattice of bamboo and reeds. Everything is natural, unpretentious, and exquisitely humble. Raikeiyu himself is a man of intense, quiet presence. He moves with a stillness and precision that is mesmerizing. He speaks little. His teaching is not in words, but in actions. He is the living embodiment of the way of tea. What Raikeiyu did was revolutionary. He took the existing philosophy of wabi-cha and pushed it to its logical and aesthetic extreme. He stripped the tea ceremony of every last vestige of ostentation, every non-minus essential element. His goal was to create a space and a ritual of such perfect simplicity that it would allow for a moment of pure, unmediated connection between the host, the guest, and the tea. He championed the use of simple, rustic, and often found objects. He might use a common fisherman's creel as a flower vase. He designed his own style of tea bowl, the rakuware, which was hand-formed rather than thrown on a wheel, making each bowl unique and intimately connected to the hand of its maker. These bowls were often imperfect, with thick, uneven glazes, and they were celebrated for exactly those qualities. He codified the sequence of the tea ceremony, the tea-mai, giving a specific purpose and a graceful, efficient form to every single movement: the folding of the silk cloth, the scooping of the tea, the whisking of the water. Under Raikeiyu, the tea ceremony became a kind of moving meditation, a silent dance of host and guest. The historical debate surrounding Raikeiyu is immense. Was he a true innovator, the creator of the tea ceremony as we know it? Or was he more of a synthesizer, a genius who took the existing ideas of his predecessors and perfected them, codifying them into a single, powerful way? Most scholars now agree he was more of the latter. He did not invent wabi-cha, but he refined it, deepened it, and, through his powerful position, institutionalized it as the dominant form of tea practice. He was the one who transformed it from a niche aesthetic into a complete philosophical and spiritual discipline, the Chedo, or the way of tea. One of the most telling details of Raikeiwayu's philosophy is his emphasis on the concept of ikigo aichi, which translates roughly as one time, one meeting. He taught that every single tea gathering is a unique event that can never be replicated. The combination of people, the season, the specific objects, the quality of the light, it will only happen once in the history of the universe. Therefore, every gathering must be entered into with the utmost sincerity and presence of mind, from both host and guest. It elevated the simple act of sharing a bowl of tea into an event of profound, unrepeatable significance. As you sit in Raikeiyu's small, dim hut, he prepares a bowl of tea for you. He uses a simple, dark raku bowl. He scoops the tea with a bamboo scoop that he carved himself that morning. Every movement is precise, economical, and filled with a quiet, unshakable confidence. He hands you the bowl. There are no words. The teaching is in the silence, in the simple, profound act of sharing a bowl of tea. You are in the presence of the man who has taken a pastime and turned it into a way. You are sitting in the profound silence of Raikeiyu's tea hut, the simple raku bowl warm in your hands. The experience is transformative, but it feels intuitive, almost primal. It is only later, as you reflect on the ceremony, that you begin to understand the complex philosophical architecture that underpins this radical simplicity. RIKU and the masters before him had distilled the entire spirit of the way of tea into four essential principles. These are not rules written on a scroll, but concepts to be absorbed into your very being. They are harmony, respect, TEI, purity, SCI, and tranquility, JAKU. Together, they form the heart of Chedo. First, you consider harmony. This is the most foundational principle. It refers to the harmony between the host and guests, but also a harmony with nature and with the objects in the tea room. You saw it in the way RIKU chose his utensils. He didn't use a collection of uniformly perfect objects. He created a pleasing, gentle harmony between a rough clay water jar and a fine silk cloth, between an ancient, gnarled wooden post and a single, fresh flower. It is the harmony you felt with the changing season, hinted at by the choice of sweets and the scroll in the alcove. And most importantly, it is the harmony that arises when a small group of people leave their worldly concerns at the door and share a single, quiet moment together. Next, you contemplate respect, or TEI. This flows naturally from harmony. It is the respect you show to your fellow guests, but it extends far beyond that. It is the deep respect for the tea master and the effort he has put into creating this unique gathering for you. It is the respect shown in the careful, deliberate handling of each utensil, whether it's a priceless antique or a simple bamboo scoop. You show respect for the bowl by holding it with both hands. You show respect for the tea by drinking it completely. By showing respect for all things, you begin to understand your own humble place in the universe. It is a profound practice in humility. Then comes purity, or SCI. This principle operates on both a physical and a spiritual level. On the physical level, the tea room is immaculately clean. Every object, from the iron kettle to the tea whisk, is ritually purified in front of the guests. The garden path leading to the hut is swept and sprinkled with water, not just to clean it, but to give it a fresh, pure feeling. This outer purity is designed to encourage an inner, spiritual purity by leaving the dust of the outside world behind your social status, your worries, your ambitions. You are able to enter the tea room with a clean heart and a clear mind, ready to be fully present in the moment. Finally, you arrive at tranquility, or JAKU. This is the ultimate goal, the culmination of the other three principles. When you have achieved harmony with your surroundings, feel a deep respect for all things, and have purified your mind of its usual chatter, you can experience a state of profound, peaceful tranquility. It is a state that the early Zen monks sought in their long hours of meditation. RIKU taught that it could be found here. In the simple act of preparing and receiving a bowl of tea, JAKU is the deep, abiding peace that comes from realizing the transient, imperfect, yet beautiful nature of life. It is the feeling of the moon shining through the clouds. The historical debate among tea scholars and philosophers often centers on the interpretation and emphasis of these four principles. Some schools of tea may place more emphasis on the formal, respectful aspects of the ceremony. Others might focus more on achieving a state of natural, rustic harmony, and the concept of JAKU, in particular, is tied up with the larger aesthetic and spiritual concept of sabi, the beauty of aged patina, and the two are often discussed together. The exact formulation of these four principles is traditionally attributed to Sen no RIKU, but it is likely that he was codifying ideas that had been evolving for a generation. A fascinating, specific illustration of these principles in action is the treatment of the silk cloth, the FUKUSA. At the beginning of the ceremony, the host performs a slow, mesmerizing like graceful series of movements to fold and unfold the FUKUSA before using it to wipe the teak adian scoop. This is not just for cleaning. The cloth is already clean. This ritual is a demonstration of purity. The precise, elegant movements are a manifestation of harmony. The focused, reverent attitude of the host is an act of respect, and by observing this quiet, focused ritual, the guests are guided into a state of tranquility. All four principles are embodied in the silent dance of a single piece of silk. You realize now that what you experienced in our IKU's hut was not just a simple, rustic gathering. It was a carefully orchestrated spiritual practice, a moving meditation designed to bring these four abstract principles to life. The tea ceremony is not about drinking tea. It is a way to practice being human. As you delve deeper into the way of tea under our IKU's guidance, you learn that the philosophy begins before you even enter the tea room. The very architecture of the space is designed to teach you a lesson, to physically and psychologically prepare you for the experience within. This is most powerfully expressed in the entrance itself. You are standing in the small, mossy garden outside the tea hut. To enter, you do not walk through a tall, stately doorway. Instead, you are confronted with the Niji Ariguchi, a crawling minus an entrance. It is a small, square aperture in the wall, perhaps only to minus half feet high. It looks more like a window or a hatch than a door. To pass through it, you have no choice but to get down on your hands and knees and crawl. This is a profound and radical architectural statement. You are a samurai, a member of the proud warrior class. You are accustomed to walking with your head held high. You wear two swords, the long katana and the shorter wakizayas, as a symbol of your status and your right to lethal force. They are a part of your identity, but you cannot enter the Niji Ariguchi wearing them. They are too long, too cumbersome. Outside the entrance, there is a simple stone rack, a cut-on omina's cake. You must first untie your swords and place them on this rack. This is a hugely significant act. You are divesting yourself of your rank, your power, and your capacity for violence. You are leaving your ego and your social identity outside, in the dusty world. Then, you must bow your head and humble yourself, physically lowering your body to the level of the earth. You crawl through the small opening. As you emerge on the other side, rising to your feet inside the dim, quiet space of the tea room, you are reborn. You are no longer a samurai, a merchant, or a thyme. You are simply a guest, and equal to everyone else in the room. The invention of the Niji Ariguchi is traditionally credited to Sen no Iku, and it is perhaps his most brilliant and enduring innovation. It is a physical manifestation of the principle of respect kei. It forces a literal and symbolic act of humility upon all who enter. A great lord, the powerful daimyo, even the shogun himself, would have to remove his swords and crawl through this tiny door. Just like the lowliest commoner, inside the tea room, all worldly ranks were, for a brief time, erased. It was a small, temporary democracy of the spirit. The historical debate around the Niji Ariguchi focuses on its origins and influences. Was it a completely original idea, or was it Ikeu, inspired by other forms of architecture? Some scholars suggest he may have been influenced by the small, low doorways on sailing ships or in the simple huts of farmers and fishermen. By adopting this humble architectural feature for his tea hut, he was elevating the rustic and the common, a core tenet of his wabi aesthetic. A specific and practical detail of the Niji Ariguchi is the stepping stone or fumite placed just inside the entrance. This is the first stone you step on as you come through the opening. It is always chosen with great care and is placed slightly higher than the garden ground outside, making the final entry into the room a conscious, physical step up and into a new space. It reinforces the sense of transition from the outer world to the inner sanctuary. This radical act of humility was not always appreciated by the powerful. There are stories of proud, arrogant warriors who were deeply offended by the requirement to crawl. To them, it was an affront to their dignity. But for Ikeu, this was precisely the point. If a guest could not humble themselves enough to enter through the small door, they were not yet ready to understand the true spirit of tea. Their heart was still too full of the dust of the world. As you stand up inside the tea room, having left your swords and your status outside, you feel a sense of lightness and freedom. The air inside feels different. The silence is deeper. The small act of crawling through the Niji Ariguchi has worked its magic. It has stripped you down to your essential self. You are not a warrior. You are simply a human being, ready to share a quiet, peaceful moment with other human beings. The lesson has been taught, and not a single word was spoken. Having entered the tea room through the humbling Niji Ariguchi, your eyes slowly adjust to the dim, tranquil light. Your gaze is naturally drawn to the Tsukonoma, a small, recessed alcove that is the spiritual and aesthetic center of the room. This is the only place where objects are formally displayed, but here too, Raikei's radical simplicity has transformed the old traditions. In the grand Shonti rooms of the shoguns, this alcove would have been filled with a magnificent display of priceless Chinese landscape painting, an ornate bronze incense burner, and a large, elaborate floral arrangement. It was a statement of wealth and connoisseurship. Here, in Raikei's hut, the Tsukonoma is almost empty. Hanging on the back wall is a single, simple scroll. It is not a colorful painting. It is a piece of calligraphy, or boku seiki ink traces, often a single Zen phrase written by a famous monk. This stark, black ink on the white paper speaks of discipline, spirit, and a single, captured moment of inspiration. And beneath it, there is a flower, but it is not a great, complex arrangement, a showcase of the arranger's technical skill. It is a single, perfect flower in a simple container. This is Habana, a specific style of flower arrangement for the tea ceremony, and its philosophy is a universe away from the more elaborate art of ikebana. Today, the container is a simple piece of dark bamboo, cut by the master's own hand, and in it, there is a single, wild camellia. Its petals are deep, velvety red. It is not yet in full bloom. It is still a bud, holding the promise of its own opening. It might even have a dewdrop still clinging to one of its leaves, as if it had just been picked from the garden this morning. And it was. The fundamental principle of Habana is that the flowers should look as they would in the wild. There is no forcing, no bending of stems with wires, no complex rules of asymmetrical triangles. The goal is to present the flower in its most natural, simple, and honest state. It is a celebration of the as-minuses. The master has chosen this single flower to express the entire feeling of the day and the season. Its budding form speaks of spring, of new life, of potential. Its deep red color provides a single, vibrant point of warmth in the otherwise muted, monochrome tones of the tea room. It is a small, transient life, placed in the heart of the room to be contemplated and appreciated for its brief, poignant beauty. This practice was a direct and conscious rejection of the older, more formal styles of flower arrangement. Raikei and the early tea masters felt that the large, complex ikebana arrangements were too showy, too self-conscious, and too perfect. They distracted from the quiet, inward spirit of the tea ceremony. Habana was intended to be the opposite: simple, understated, and utterly natural. The historical debate here concerns the very definition of natural, the placement of the flower, the choice of the vase, the way a leaf might be trimmed to improve the composition. All of this involves the hand of the artist. So, is Habana truly natural? The tea masters would argue that it is a higher form of nature, an edited, curated nature that reveals the flower's essential spirit, or heart, without the distraction of its messy, wild surroundings. It is nature, perfected through simplicity. One of the most famous and illustrative stories about our Raikei and Habana involves his morning glories. His patron, the great warlord Hideyoshi, heard that our Raikei's garden was filled with magnificent morning glories and invited himself over for a tea ceremony specifically to see them. When Hideyoshi arrived, he was shocked and angered to find that every single morning glory in the garden had been cut down. He stormed into the tea hut, ready to berate his tea master. only to stop dead in his tracks. There, in the two konoma, was a single, perfect morning glory, glistening with dew, in a simple bronze vase. You had destroyed his entire garden to focus all of his guests' attention and all of the universe's beauty on that one perfect, transient flower. As you gaze at the single camellia in its bamboo vase, you understand the flower is not just decoration. It is a guest of honor. It is a teacher. It is reminding you of the beauty of simplicity, the preciousness of this single moment, and the transient nature of all life. In this small, quiet room, a single flower has become a sermon. Your attention shifts from the single, living flower in the two konoma to the inanimate objects the host is now assembling for the ceremony. In the old shanty rooms, these would have been the famous, pedigreed treasures. Here, in our IKU's world, they are humble, but you are learning to see them not as objects, but as characters, each with its own story and its own soul. The host reaches for the choshaku, the tea scoop. It is a simple, slender sliver of bamboo, gracefully curved at its tip to form a shallow scoop. It is the tool that will transfer the powdered green tea from the caddy to the bowl. In a material sense, it is almost worthless. It is a piece of bamboo. Anyone could make one in a few minutes. But this scoop is different. It was carved by the host himself, the tea master. He would have gone to the bamboo grove, selected the perfect piece, and, using a small knife, carefully cut and shaped it. The process is a form of meditation. As he carves, he imbues the object with his spirit, his intention for the day's gathering. Then, he performs a final, crucial act of creation. He gives the scoop a name, a poetic name, a May, which is often related to the season, a line from a poem, or his end concept. He might call it first snow, or mountain wind, or cricket song. This name is not written on the scoop itself. It is inscribed on its custom-made bamboo storage tube. When the time comes to use the scoop in the ceremony, the host will present it to the main guest, who will ask its name. The host will reply, "Mountain Wind," and in that moment, a simple bamboo utensil is transformed. It is no longer just a scoop. It is an invitation to imagine a cool wind blowing through the pines on a distant mountain. It elevates a functional object into a piece of poetry, a trigger for the imagination, a shared secret between host and guest. This practice of naming utensils is one of the most subtle and beautiful aspects of the way of tea. It is the ultimate expression of finding profound value in the humblest of things. The tea masters, especially our IKU, taught that a scoop carved by one's own hand with a thoughtful name was superior to a priceless, antique ivory scoop from China. The value lay not in the material, but in the spirit and intention invested in it. The historical development of the choshaku is a perfect microcosm of the development of the tea ceremony itself. The very first tea scoops used in Japan were likely made of metal or ivory, imported from China along with the other tea treasures. They were ornate and valuable. But as the wabi aesthetic took hold, masters like J.U.K.O. and R.I.K.U. began to champion the simple, humble beauty of bamboo. In particular, is credited with perfecting the art of the carved bamboo scoop, making it a central expressive element of his tea practice. A specific and lovely detail is the note of the bamboo. A master carver would carefully consider the placement of the bamboo's natural joint, or node. A scoop with the node at its center might have a different feel and balance than one with the node near the end. The way the carver chose to use this natural feature of the bamboo was part of the art. Some of our IKU's most famous scoops are celebrated for their imperfect qualities: a crack, the wormhole, a stain in the bamboo that he chose not to discard, but to embrace as part of the scoop's unique character. It's Sabi, as the host now uses his scoop, Mountain Wind, to transfer the deep green matcha into your tea bowl. You see it with new eyes. It is not a spoon. It is a poem, a piece of sculpture, a tangible piece of its maker's soul. It is a humble sliver of bamboo that contains the entire universe of wabi-cha. You have learned that in the way of tea, the smallest things often hold the greatest meaning. You are now a witness to this strange and potent pairing. On one hand, you have our ITU, the advocate of a severe, minimalist, and deeply spiritual aesthetic. His ideal is a tiny, rustic hut, a cracked bowl, a single flower. On the other hand, you have Hideyoshi, born a peasant. He rose through sheer force of will and military genius to become the de facto ruler of all Japan. He was a man of boundless ambition and colossal ego. His aesthetic was the complete opposite of RIKU's. He loved gold, grandeur, and ostentatious display. He built a portable, solid -gold tea room that he could take with him on his military campaigns. He hosted a legendary tea party at the Kitano Shrine, a 10-day extravaganza to which he invited the entire population of Kyoto, from lords to peasants, to come and share tea. These two men, the master of wabi and the master of wow, formed a deep but volatile bond. Hideyoshi, for all his love of pomp, was smart enough to recognize the profound cultural power that RIKU wielded. By becoming his patron and embracing the way of tea, Hideyoshi could legitimize his rule. It showed that he was not just a brutish warlord, but a man of refined taste and culture. The tea ceremony became, for him, a powerful to love political diplomacy. He would hold tea ceremonies for his rival daimyos, using the intimate, structured setting to negotiate treaties and forge alliances. In turn, gained immense influence through his position as Hideyoshi's personal tea master. He was no longer just a merchant's son from Sake. He was one of the most powerful cultural arbiters in the land, a confidant to the ruler of Japan. He used this position to spread his philosophy of wabi-cha, making it the dominant and most fashionable style of tea. The relationship was a fascinating dance of opposites. Hideyoshi would ask IKU to preside over a ceremony in his glittering gold tea room, and IKU, the master of rustic poverty, would do so with perfect grace. IKU would invite Hideyoshi to his tiny, -mad hut, and the great ruler of Japan would have to leave his guards, his swords, and his ego at the door and crawl inside. The great historical question that hangs over this relationship is, what was its true nature? Was it a genuine friendship based on mutual respect for each other's mastery in their respective fields? Or was it a purely political arrangement, a marriage of convenience between power and culture? And how did IKU, the master of humility, navigate the treacherous waters of a paranoid dictator's court? The evidence suggests a complex mix of all these things. For years, they seemed to have a genuine bond. Hideyoshi trusted IKU's judgment not just on aesthetics, but on political matters as well. But the tension between their two opposing worldviews was always present. A famous story perfectly illustrates this tension. One day, Hideyoshi came to IKU for a tea ceremony. As he walked down the garden path, he noticed a beautiful, ornate stone lantern, a recent gift from another lord. A fine lantern, Hideyoshi said. It adds much to your garden. When Hideyoshi left the tea room a few hours later, he saw that IKU had taken a hammer and smashed the beautiful lantern to pieces. His message was clear: if an object, no matter how beautiful, becomes a source of attachment or pride, if it is praised for its monetary or decorative value, it has no place in the world of wabi. It is a dust that must be swept away. It was a bold, almost insane, act of defiance against his all-powerful master. This was the core of their conflict. For Hideyoshi, the tea ceremony was ultimately a tool, a means to a political or social end. For IKU, the way of tea was the end in itself. It was a path to spiritual awakening, and it could not be compromised for worldly power. This fundamental difference in philosophy would eventually lead them to a tragic and fatal collision. The warlord and the tea master were on a path that could only end in one way. You are now a silent witness to the final, poignant act of Riku's life. He is not in a grand temple or a formal hall. He has gathered a few of his closest disciples in his own small, familiar to room, the space that was the ultimate expression of his life's philosophy. The atmosphere is not one of panic or despair. It is imbued with a profound, sorrowful, and yet utterly calm sense of purpose. Riku knows his fate. He does not rail against it. Instead, he decides to perform one last tea ceremony. He will face death in the same way he faced life, through the way of tea. He begins the tea, the sequence of movements for preparing the tea. Every gesture is as precise, as graceful, as economical as ever. But now, each movement is charged with an almost unbearable poignancy. The folding of the silk FUKUSA, the gentle scooping of the tea from his favorite caddy, the whisking of the water in the simple raku bowl. It is the same dance he has performed thousands of times, but this time, it is a final farewell. He is performing the ultimate act of Ikigoichi. One time, one meeting. This is truly a gathering that will never happen again. He is completely present, his mind free of any distraction. His disciples watch, their hearts breaking, as he transforms this moment of impending death into an act of pure, transcendent beauty. He prepares a bowl of tea and serves it to each of his disciples in turn. He shares a quiet word with each of them. Then comes the most famous and heartbreaking part of the legend. After the guests have finished, Riku takes the tea bowl he has just used, his own favorite. A simple, dark raku bowl, and he holds it before him. Never again shall this bowl, polluted by the lips of misfortune, be used by man, he says. Then with that, he smashes it on the ground. He then gives each of his disciples a piece of the broken bowl as a final memento. The historicity of this dramatic act is, of course, debated by scholars. Is it a true account, or a beautiful piece of hagiography created by his followers to mythologize his death? The truth is impossible to know, and in a way, it doesn't matter. The story perfectly encapsulates his philosophy. By smashing the bowl, he was performing a final, radical act of non-attachment. He was demonstrating that even the most cherished object, an object imbued with the spirit of wabi-sabi, is ultimately transient. Its memory and the spirit of the moment were more important than its physical form. After the tea ceremony is over, Riku dismisses his disciples. He removes the flower from the tukonoma. He takes down the scroll. The tea room is now completely empty, a void. He then changes into a pure white death robe and composes his final death poem. The reasons for Hideyoshi's order remain a source of intense debate. Was it because of a disagreement over the price of a tea utensil? Was it because of Riku's supposed arrogance in placing a statue of himself on the gate of a major temple, forcing Hideyoshi to walk beneath it? Was Riku involved in political intrigue with his master's rivals? Or was it simply that Hideyoshi's colossal ego could no longer tolerate the existence of a man who possessed a different kind of authority? A spiritual authority that the warlord could never hope to attain? Hideyoshi could conquer Japan, but he could not conquer the quiet, unshakable spirit of his tea master, and so he had to destroy him. As the story goes, Riku then calmly performs seppuku, meeting his end with the same serene composure with which he lived his life. His death marks the end of an era. The greatest tea master the world had ever known was gone, a victim of the very worldly power he had tried to transcend. But his death was not an end. It was a martyrdom that would ensure his philosophy would live forever. The way of tea was now sealed not just in beauty, but in blood. The death of Sen no Riku sent a shockwave through the cultural world of Japan. The greatest master was gone, executed at the whim of a powerful lord. It was a dangerous time for his family and his disciples. The way of tea could have easily been scattered, its fragile philosophy lost in the political turmoil. But what happened next ensured its survival and shaped its future for the next 400 years. You are now in the years following Riku's death. The political landscape has shifted once again. The great warlord Hideyoshi is gone, and a new era of peace, the Edo period, is dawning under the iron-fisted rule of the Takugoja shogunate. In this new, stable world, Riku's family and legacy are rehabilitated. His name is cleared. His philosophy is no longer seen as a form of quiet rebellion, but as the pinnacle of Japanese aesthetics. The task of preserving and transmitting Riku's teachings fell to his direct descendants, most notably his grandson, Sen Sotan. Sotan was a man who inherited his grandfather's deep understanding of wabi-cha. But he lived in a very different world. He was not a confidant to great warlords, but a quiet practitioner in a time of peace. His challenge was this: how do you pass on a philosophy that is so personal, so intuitive, and so dependent on the spirit of a single great master? How do you institutionalize a rebellion? Sotan's solution was both pragmatic and brilliant. He recognized that his own sons had different personalities and different aptitudes for tea. Rather than forcing them all into a single mold, he divided his household and his legacy among them. He established 3 distinct tea traditions, each headed by one of his sons, all stemming from the single source of their grandfather. These became the San-Senke, the 3 Sen houses or 3 Sen families. They are known as the Omotsenke, the Urasenke, and the Mishakoji Senke schools. You are now observing the subtle differences that begin to emerge between these 3 schools. They all follow the fundamental principles of Riku's wabi-cha. They all revere the same for concepts of harmony, respect, purity, and tranquility, but in their practice and style, they begin to express different aspects of Riku's spirit. The Omotsenke, the front house, is seen as the most direct and conservative heir to the tradition. Their style is simple, natural, and reserved. They adhere strictly to the humble, rustic wabi aesthetic. The Urasenke, the rear house, developed a slightly more accessible and Wahanaika style, while still rooted in wabi. They allowed for a little more color, a slightly more decorated utensil, a more flowing and graceful style of movement. This approach would eventually make the Urasenke school the largest and most internationally known of the 3, as it was more adaptable to teaching a wider range of students. The Mishakoji Senke, named for the street their tea house was on, took a path somewhere between the 2, known for a bold and direct interpretation of Riku's style. The historical debate here is whether this division was a good thing. Did it dilute Riku's pure vision by creating styles and schools, a kind of formalization that Riku himself might have rejected? Or was it a stroke of genius that allowed the way of tea to survive and adapt to changing times? The consensus is that it was essential, by creating a formal lineage system, an Iemoto system where the Grand Master of each school passes down the authority to the next generation. The San-Senken ensured that the teachings would not be lost or corrupted. They created a structure that could preserve the formless. A wonderful, specific example of the differences between the schools can be seen in the way they whisk the tea. An Omotsenke practitioner will whisk the matcha to create a foam that mostly covers the surface, but leaves a small, crescent-moon-shaped area of liquid green in the center. An Urasenke practitioner, on the other hand, will whisk to create a thick, uniform, creamy head of foam that completely covers the surface, like a fine cappuccino. It is a tiny, subtle difference, but one that is instantly recognizable to an initiated guest. It is a signature, a declaration of lineage in a bowl of tea. Thanks to the wisdom of Sen Sotan, Riku's death did not end his legacy. It traumatized it. It created 3 distinct streams, all flowing from the same mountain spring. These 3 schools, through their friendly rivalry and their shared devotion, would carry the way of tea through the centuries. ensuring that the quiet spirit of the humble tea hut would not only survive, but flourish. With the establishment of the great schools of tea, the Sen-Senke, the teachings of RIK, you work codified and preserved. The spirit of Wabi-Cha was now supported by a formal structure. This structure was built around the practice of kata, a concept central to many Japanese arts. Kata are the detailed, prescribed patterns of movement that form the foundation of the practice. You are now a student in one of these schools, perhaps the Uruzeng. In the peaceful Edo period, the age of warriors is over. You are likely the son of a wealthy merchant, learning the way of tea as a mark of cultural refinement and as a spiritual practice. Your teacher is not teaching you philosophy from a book. He is teaching you with his body, and you are learning with yours. Today's lesson is focused on a single sequence of movements, the ritual cleaning of the natsu, the small, lacquered tea caddy that holds the powdered matcha. The master tells you that this is not about hygiene. The natsu is already perfectly clean. This is a kata, a silent performance that embodies the principles of harmony, respect, and purity. He begins. He takes out his fukayose, the square silk cloth that is tucked into the belt of his kimono. The fukayose represents the host's spirit. The way he handles it is the first part of the kata. He unfolds it with a series of impossibly graceful, deliberate movements. It is not crumpled or shaken out. It is opened with a crisp, controlled sequence of folds, like a flower blooming in his hands. This is called the fukayose sabaki. He then holds the natsu in his left hand and, with the folded fukayose in his right, he begins to wipe its surface. His movements are not a rough scrubbing. They are a gentle, prescribed dance. He makes a single, straight wipe across the lid. He turns the caddy and wipes the sides. The movements are precise, economical, and have a quiet, rhythmic beauty. He is not just wiping a jar. He is performing a ritual of purification, honoring the object and the tea within it. You watch, mesmerized. Every detail has a purpose. The way he holds his elbows, the angle of his wrist, the path his hand takes through the air, all have been refined over generations. The goal of the kata is not just to complete the task of cleaning the caddy, but to do so with the utmost grace and efficiency, eliminating every single wasted or extraneous movement. It is a physical manifestation of Zen economy. The historical debate around kata in the tea ceremony is about its origin and purpose. Were these movements designed by IKU himself, or did they evolve over time within the schools? It's likely a combination. IKU established the foundation of efficient, mindful movement, and the later Iemoto, the grand masters of the schools, refined these into the specific kata that are practiced today. Some critics argue that the rigid formality of kata can sometimes deaden the spontaneity that IKU prized. The defenders of kata argue the opposite, that by mastering the form so completely that you no longer have to think about it, you are actually liberated. Your body performs the perfect movements automatically, freeing your mind and spirit to focus completely on the guest in the moment. A specific and beautiful example of the detail within a kata is the final placement of the lid of the iron kettle, the koma. After adding cold water to the kettle to adjust its temperature, the host will replace the heavy iron lid, but he does not just place it back on fully closed. He sets it slightly ajar, creating a small gap. This is not a random gesture. It has a meaning. It signals to the guests that the water is no longer at the peak boil for making tea. It is a silent piece of communication, a tiny detail of etiquette embedded in the formal sequence of movements. Your turn comes. You take the fukayose in your hands. It feels clumsy, alien. You try to replicate the master's unfolding movement, and your fingers fumble. You try to wipe the natsu, and your movements are jerky and uncertain. It looks simple, but you now realize it is profoundly difficult. Your master is patient. He corrects the angle of your hand. He guides you through the sequence again, and again, and again. You are not just learning a set of motions. You are retraining your body. your muscle memory, your very way of being in space. You are learning that, in the way of tea, the journey is not just spiritual, but physical, and that true freedom and grace can only be found through the patient, humble mastery of the form. You are deep in your practice of the silent, graceful kata. Your movements are becoming smoother, more ingrained. You are learning to communicate through gesture, but your master now tells you that you must learn to listen. The tea room, which at first seemed silent, is in fact filled with a subtle and beautiful music, and the lead instrument in this orchestra is the iron kettle. You are sitting in the tea room, and for the first time, your teacher directs your full attention to the kama. The heavy, cast-minus iron kettle that sits over a bed of glowing charcoal in a sunken hearth cut into the tatami floor. The water within it is beginning to heat up. At first, you hear nothing. The room is quiet, but then, as you focus, you begin to perceive a low, deep hum, like a distant wind. As the water gets hotter, the sound changes. The hum grows louder, joined by a soft, singing, almost sighing sound. This is the sound of the water boiling. But in the way of tea, it is never just the sound of boiling water. It is given a poetic name, matsukais, which means the wind in the pines. Your master explains that learning to listen to the matsukais is a crucial skill for a tea host. The sound tells you everything you need to know about the state of the water. There is a specific point in the boiling process, a specific song the kettle sings, that indicates the water is at the absolute perfect temperature for whisking matcha. Too hot, and the water will scald the delicate tea, making it bitter. Not hot enough, and the tea will not foam properly, and its flavor will be flat. The master host can listen to the wind in his pines and know, without a thermometer, the precise moment to ladle the water into the tea bowl. It is a form of connoisseurship that is purely auditory. This focus on sound is a key part of the multi-minus sensory experience of the tea ceremony. It is not just about the taste of the tea or the sight of the utensils. It is about the feel of the warm bowl, the scent of the incense and the steam, and the sounds of the room. The matsukais provides the gentle, constant soundscape for the entire gathering. It is a natural, soothing white noise that helps to quiet the mind and focus the attention. The historical study of the kama is a field in itself. The kettles were made by families of master craftsmen who passed their skills down for generations. The shape of the kettle, the texture of its iron surface, the style of its lid all were subject to the same aesthetic scrutiny as the tea bowls. Some kettles were prized for their rugged, powerful appearance. Others were celebrated for their elegant, graceful lines. The most fascinating undebated aspect of the kama is the science behind the matsukai sound itself. Why does the boiling water sing in this particular way? The sound is created by the complex interaction of bubbles forming on the rough, cast-iron surface, the convection currents in the water, and the specific shape of the kettle, which acts as a resonance chamber. Different kettles, made by different masters, were said to have their own unique voice. A tea connoisseur could supposedly identify the maker of a kettle just by listening to its matsukais. A particularly beautiful detail involves the preparation of the charcoal fire, the sumi, that heats the kettle. The arrangement of the charcoal is another art form, the sum-ai-mei. The host lays the pieces of charcoal in a specific, beautiful pattern designed to heat the kettle most efficiently while creating a clean, long-lasting fire with minimal smoke. The glowing, reed-, or inch charcoal against the bed of pure white ash is considered a beautiful sight in itself, especially in the winter. A small, contained volcano of warmth at the center of the room. The sound of the matsukais is born from this carefully constructed fire. You close your eyes, shutting out all the visual information of the room. You just listen. You hear the deep hum, the gentle sighing, the soft popping sounds. It truly does sound like wind moving through a distant forest of pine trees. It is a sound that is both random and rhythmic, both powerful and gentle. It is the sound of nature, brought inside and tamed. It is the heartbeat of the tea room. By learning to listen to it, you are learning to listen to the subtle, quiet voice of the present moment. You have learned to see with new eyes and to listen with new ears. The tea ceremony is revealing itself to you as a complete sensory experience. Now, your master introduces another layer, one that connects the ceremony directly to the ephemeral, passing beauty of the natural world. It is time for the sweets. Before the host serves the thick, frothy matcha, he will present the guests with wagasai, traditional Japanese confections. These are not an afterthought, not a simple sugary treat to counteract the bitterness of the tea. They are a work of art in themselves, a tiny, edible poem about the current season. Your master places a small, lacquer tray before you. On it rests a single, exquisite sweet. It is early spring, and the sweet is shaped like a delicate, pale pink cherry blossom. It is made from a smooth, sweet bean paste called and, carefully molded by hand. Its flavor is subtle, not overwhelmingly sweet, designed to cleanse the palate and prepare it for the complex taste of the matcha to come. You admire it for a moment, a perfect, miniature sculpture. You pick it up with a small wooden pick, a coral emoji, and take a bite. The texture is soft, the flavor is gentle and clean. It is the taste of the season. The art of wagasai is inextricably linked to the way of tea. The sweets served are always chosen to reflect the specific time of year, often with a startling degree of precision. In the spring, you might be served a sweet shaped like a blossom or a young, green leaf. In the summer, it might be a translucent, gelatinous, like sweet that looks like a cool drop of water, evoking a sense of refreshment. In the autumn, it could be a confection shaped and colored, like a maple leaf or a chestnut. And in the winter, it might be a white, snowball minus like sweet, dusted with powdered sugar. The names of the sweets, like the names of the tea scoops, are also poetic, often alluding to famous poems or natural phenomena associated with the season. The guest is expected to ask the name of the sweet, adding another layer of literary and seasonal appreciation to the experience. This deep connection to the seasons is a manifestation of the principle of harmony wa. The tea gathering is not an event that happens outside of time. It is deeply embedded in the natural rhythms of the year. By serving a sweet that evokes the current season, the host is bringing the entire natural world into the tiny, enclosed space of the tea room. The historical development of wagasai is a fascinating story. The earliest sweets served with tea were likely simple, natural foods like dried persimmons or chestnuts. The influence of Chinese confectionery, brought back by monks and traders, introduced the use of sugar and bean paste. But it was in the context of the tea ceremony that wagasai minus making was elevated to a high art form, with confectioners competing to create ever more beautiful and evocative seasonal designs. The debate among culinary historians often revolves around the region and symbolism of the sweets. Different regions of Japan developed their own unique styles and specialty wagasai, and the symbolism could be incredibly complex. A sweet might not just represent a season, but also a specific legend, a famous place, or a Zen concept. Decoding the meaning of the wagasai was part of the pleasure for a knowledgeable guest. A specific and wonderful example of this art form is a type of sweet called kinton. It is made by pressing strained sweet bean paste through a fine sieve, creating a mass of tiny, delicate noodles. These are then carefully gathered around a small ball of smooth bean paste. By using different colors for the sieved paste, the confectioner can create astonishingly realistic and beautiful effects. They can evoke a cluster of autumn leaves, the mossy rock, or a cloud minus like mountain peak. The kinton is a tiny, edible landscape painting. As you finish the last bite of your cherry blossom sweet, a faint, clean sweetness lingers on your tongue. It has prepared you perfectly for the tea that is to follow. The sweet was not just a food. It was a message. It was a reminder that you are here, now, in this room, On this specific day in early spring, it was a small, edible moment of pure presence. The way of tea, as shaped by your IKU unpreserved by the Sen-Senka, has now reached a state of mature, refined perfection. But who is it for? In the turbulent 16th century, it was the domain of powerful warriors and the cultural elite. Now, as Japan settles into the long, peaceful, and prosperous Edo period from the 17th to the 19th century, the ceremony finds a new and fervent group of practitioners. You are no longer a monk or a samurai. You are a chonin, a member of the rising merchant class in a booming city like Edo or Osaka. Your life is one of commerce, of numbers, of profit and loss. You spend your days in a bustling shop, haggling with suppliers, managing inventory, and keeping your account books. It is a world of stress, competition, and constant, worldly calculation. And for you, the tea room becomes a sanctuary. After a long week of work, you make your way to the home of your tea master for a weekend gathering. You leave the noisy, dusty, crowded streets of the city behind. You enter the gate that leads to the tea house, and you are in a different world. This is the beginning of the journey, the path to the quiet place. The tea ceremony, for the merchant class of the Edo period, was not a tool for political diplomacy or a display of priceless treasures. It was a form of spiritual and psychological release. It was a structured, disciplined escape from the chaos and vulgarity of their commercial lives. In the tea room, the rules of the marketplace did not apply. Your wealth, your business success, your social standing among other merchants, all of it was irrelevant. You left it at the door, along with your metaphorical swords. Inside the tea hut, you could cultivate a different kind of wealth, a wealth of spirit, of aesthetic sensitivity, of quiet contemplation. The wabi-sabi aesthetic, with its emphasis on humility, simplicity, and on-attachment to material things, was a perfect antidote to the materialism of your daily life. It was a way to cleanse the palate of the soul. This adoption of the tea ceremony by the merchant class was a crucial development. It democratized the way of tea, spreading it beyond the narrow confines of the ruling elite. The merchants, with their growing wealth, became the new patrons of tea. They commissioned tea houses, bought utensils, and supported tea masters. They ensured that the art form would not just survive, but thrive as a central part of Japanese urban culture. The historical debate here concerns the purity of this new form of tea. Did the merchants truly embrace the deeps and philosophy of wabi-sabi, or did they simply adopt the outward forms of the ceremony as a fashionable status symbol, a way to mimic the culture of the samurai class they officially ranked below? The answer, as always, is complex. No doubt, for some, it was a form of social climbing, but the surviving diaries and letters of many merchants from this period reveal a genuine and deep engagement with the spiritual principles of tea. They truly did find it to be a source of profound peace and meaning in their otherwise hectic lives. A specific and fascinating expression of the merchant class involvement in tea was the development of unique collections of utensils. A wealthy merchant could not compete with a great daimyo in acquiring famous, antique Chinese treasures. So, they cultivated a different kind of connoisseurship. They might specialize in a particular type of local pottery, where they might commission living artists to create new, innovative tea bowls and water jars. Their collections were often more personal, more intimate, and more reflective of their own individual taste, rather than being a display of inherited, blue-chip brand names. As you, the merchant, kneel in the quiet tea room, you feel the stress of the week begin to melt away. The sound of the matsukais, the wind in the pines, drowns out the memory of the abacus's clatter. The simple, humble beauty of the tea bowl in your hands feels more real and more valuable than the pile of gold coins in your counting house. For a few precious hours, you are not a merchant. You are a student of a quiet and beautiful way. The tea room is not a place you have come to. It is a place you have returned to. It is your true home. You have learned that the tea ceremony is a journey, and that journey begins long before you touch the tea bowl. The physical path that leads from the bustling outer world to the inner sanctuary of the tea hut is a crucial and often overlooked part of the experience. It is a transitional space, a spiritual airlock. It is called the ROJI. The word ROJ literally means dewy ground or dewy path. It evokes the image of a fresh, clean, untouched mountain path, far from the dust of the city. As a guest, your experience of the ceremony starts here. As you walk this carefully designed garden path, you step through a simple outer gate, leaving the street behind. You find yourself in a small, enclosed garden. The path is not a straight, paved walkway. It is a winding, indirect line of carefully placed stepping stones, or tobi sushi. The stones are deliberately uneven, forcing you to slow down, to watch your step, to pay attention to the physical act of walking. You cannot rush through the ROJI. It demands mindfulness. The garden itself is not a manicured flower bed or a grand landscape. It is designed to look like a remote, natural mountain trail. It is filled with moss, ferns, and shady trees. There are no brightly colored, distracting flowers. The color palette is a soothing, subtle symphony of greens and browns. The path is often sprinkled with water before the guests arrive, to enhance the dewy feeling of freshness and purity, and to settle the dust. Halfway along the path, you come to a stone water basin, the Tsukuba-ai. It is a low basin, placed so that you must crouch down to use it. Another infrastact of humility. Here, you perform a ritual of purification. You take a long Midas-handled bamboo ladle, fill it with cool, fresh water from the basin, and pour it first over your left hand, then your right. You then pour a little water into your cupped hand and rinse your mouth, spitting the water out discreetly onto the ground below the basin. Finally, you tip the ladle up to let the remaining water run down the handle, symbolically cleansing the tea itself. This act is both a physical and a spiritual cleansing. You are washing away the dust of the world you have just left, preparing yourself to enter the sacred space of the tea hut with a clean body and a pure heart. The design of the ROJI is a high art form, credited largely to Senno Riku. He understood that to achieve the deep tranquility of the tea ceremony, the guests needed to be gradually prepared. The ROJI was his tool for this preparation. It was designed to sever the connection with the ordinary world and to induce a state of calm, meditative awareness before the ceremony even began. The historical debate among garden designers and tea historians concerns the degree of naturalness in the ROJI. Is it truly a natural space, or a highly artificial and controlled one? The answer is that it is a masterpiece of artifice designed to look natural. Every stone, every lantern, every clump of moss is placed with the utmost care to create a specific aesthetic and psychological effect. It is a nature that has been perfected by the hand of a master artist. A specific and beautiful feature of the ROJI is the sleeve minus brushing pine or some other strategically placed tree or shrub. The path is designed to be narrow, so that as you walk, your sleeve might gently brush against the branch of a pine or a damp fern. This small, tactile sensation is another way of grounding you in the present moment, of making you aware of your physical presence in this quiet, natural minus seeming world. After your ritual purification at the Tsukuba-ai, you continue along the path. You can now see the tea hut ahead, with its tiny, lone Ichi Ariguchi. The path has done its work. Your mind has quieted. Your pace has slowed. Your senses are awake. You have walked a path that has taken you not just a few yards through a garden, but miles away from your everyday life. You have arrived, not just at the door of the tea hut, but at the threshold of a different state of being. You have passed through the dewy garden, cleansed your hands and heart, and crawled to the humble entrance. You are now inside the quiet, still heart of the tea ceremony. The host has prepared a bowl of tea for you. He kneels before you and places it on the tatami mat. You bow in thanks, pick it up, and for the first time, you truly hold it. And in that moment, you understand that you are not just holding a cup. You are holding a universe in your hands. The join, the tea bowl, is the most intimate and important of all the tea utensils. It is the vessel that bridges the host and the guest. It is the object that you will press to your lips. Its physical undesthetic qualities are meant to be appreciated not just with the eyes, but with the hands and the mouth. Following the prescribed etiquette, you place the bowl on the palm of your left hand, your fingers cradling its side. You then bring your right hand to steady it. The bowl is warm from the hot water, a gentle, living heat that seeps into your palms. It is a comforting, grounding sensation. You take a moment to appreciate its physical form. You feel its weight. A good bowl has a pleasing heft, a sense of substance. You feel its texture. Is it a rough, sandy, unglazed china bowl, or a smooth, crackled, higgy bowl? Your fingertips read the story of the clay and the fire. Then you look into it. The deep, vibrant green of the matcha is a pool of color against the dark, earthy tones of the bowl's interior. It is a small, perfect world. You raise the bowl to your lips. You take a sip. As you drink, the rim of the bowl touches you. The texture of the glaze, the precise shape of the rim, all of this is part of the experience. A master potter considers the lip minus feel of a bowl as one of its most important qualities. This deep, multi-minus sensory appreciation of a single object is at the core of the way of tea. It is an exercise in pure mindfulness. In this moment, there is only you, the bowl, and the tea. The world outside, with all its worries and distractions, has ceased to exist. The history of the Choan is the history of Japanese aesthetics in miniature. As you know, the earliest and most prized bowls were the perfect, symmetrical tenmoku bowls from China. But with the rise of wabi-cha, the focus shifted to the humbler, more irregular bowls from Korea. And then, most importantly, to domestically produced wares. Potters in places like China, Shigaraki, and IGA began creating wares specifically for the tea ceremony, wares that celebrated the accidental drips of glaze, the scorch marks from the kiln, the rough, honest texture of the local clay. The most famous of all tea wares, of course, is the raku bowl, which was developed in direct collaboration with Sen no Ikeu. Raku ware is unique. It is not thrown on a wheel, but hand-built, giving it an intimate, organic feel. It is fired at a low temperature and then removed from the hot kiln and plunged into water or combustible material, a dramatic process that results in unique, unpredictable glaze effects. A raku bowl is a perfect expression of the wabi-sabi ideal. It is humble, imperfect, and utterly unique. The scholarly debate around Chohan is a universe of connoisseurship. Experts will argue for hours about the precise shape of a bowl's foot, the ring on its base. They will analyze the way a glaze has crackled, the specific color of the clay, the history and provenance of a famous named bowl. For a true tea master, a great Chohan is as significant and as worthy of study as a great painting or sculpture. A wonderful and specific aspect of appreciating the bowl is the act of turning it. Before you drink, you are meant to turn the bowl slightly in your hands, so that you do not drink from its front, the side with the most interesting decoration or feature. This is an act of humility and respect for the bowl and its maker. After you have finished the tea, you wipe the rim where your lips touched and turn the front back towards the host as you return it. It is a small, silent dialogue with the object. You take your final sip of the thick green tea. You hold the now empty bowl in your hands for a moment longer, feeling its residual warmth. It is just a piece of fired clay, but in the context of this quiet room, through the act of mindful attention, it has become something more. It has become a vessel for tranquility, a teacher of beauty, a small, warm universe that you were privileged to hold, just for a moment, in your own two hands. The last empty tea bowl has been taken away. The host has cleaned the utensils, his movements as graceful in closing as they were in opening. The matsukes, the wind in the pines, has fallen silent as the kettle has cooled. The gathering is over. You bow a final time to your host into the now -empty Tokonoma alcove. You make your way to the Lonichi Arikuchi, crawl back through it, and emerge into the late afternoon light of the garden. As you retrieve your sword's oar, in your merchant's case, your worldly concerns and walk back down the dewy path of the Roji, you feel a profound change. The experience doesn't feel like it has ended. The gate to the outer world seems less like an exit and more like a new kind of entrance. You are centering your daily life, that you are bringing the tea room with you. This is the final, and perhaps most important, lesson of the way of tea that just hits you. The physical tea room is ultimately just a training ground. It is a crucible designed to forge a new state of mind. The ultimate goal is not to spend your life in a tea hut, but to carry the spirit of the tea hut within you, out into the dusty world. The true tea room is portable. It is a space you build in your own mind. As you walk through the bustling streets of your city, you begin to see things differently. You see the four principles of tea everywhere. You find harmony while in the simple act of arranging the tools on your desk, creating a small island of order in a sea of chaos. You find it in noticing the way the evening light falls on a building you pass every day, creating a brief, beautiful harmony of light and shadow. You practice respect kei, when you pick up your favorite cup for your morning drink, holding it with both hands for a moment, appreciating its familiar weight and warmth. You practice it by truly listening to a friend or a family member, giving them the gift of your full, undivided attention, just as you gave it to the host in the tea room. You create purity when you take a moment to tidy a small corner of your home. The physical act of cleaning creating a corresponding clarity in your mind. You practice it by taking 3 deep breaths before starting a difficult task, cleansing your mind of its anxious chatter. And you discover tranquility jiku, not by retreating to a mountain monastery, but by finding it in small pockets of your day. It is the 5 minutes of silence you steal to simply sit and drink a cup of tea, without a screen, without a book, without a distraction. It is the quiet appreciation of the patina of age on a favorite wooden tallor or worn leather chair. It is the acceptance of a crack in a beloved object. A moment of wabi-sabi in your own life. The historical legacy of the way of tea is not just the preservation of a ceremony, but the dissemination of a philosophy. In the modern era, this philosophy has spread far beyond Japan. Tea masters now teach in London, in Sao Paulo, in New York. Enthusiasts build tea rooms in their suburban backyards. The physical form has proven to be remarkably adaptable. This global spread has, of course, sparked a new historical and cultural debate. Can the way of tea retain its deep, authentic spirit when it is removed from the rich cultural, religious, and linguistic soil of Japan in which it grew for centuries? Is it possible for an un-Japanese person to truly grasp the profound nuances of wabi-sabi and dikigo, aichi, or does the practice, when exported, inevitably become more of a beautiful, meditative performance, a focus on aesthetics rather than a deep, spiritual discipline? It is a question that practitioners and scholars continue to explore. But perhaps the answer lies in the very portability that our IKU intended. The journey that began with a bitter, medicinal drink for monks trying to stay awake has reached its logical conclusion. The ultimate purpose was never about the tea itself. It was about using the simple, everyday act of preparing a beverage as a way to practice being fully human. It is a way to find a moment of grace, a sliver of sacred time, in the midst of an ordinary day. Whether you have a formal tea room or just a favorite kitchen mug, the lesson is the same. The quiet ritual, the mindful attention, the appreciation for the simple, fluid, and transient. This is the enduring gift of the way of tea. The tea room is in your mind, waiting for you to enter. The last embers of the charcoal fire have faded to a soft, gray ash. The ROJ path is now veiled in the deep shadows of twilight, its stones holding the cool memory of the evening dew. The story of tea, from its first bitter shock to its final, quiet philosophy, has dissolved, leaving behind only a sense of profound and settled peace. The journey is complete. The imaginary teacup has been emptied, its warmth now a gentle memory in the palms of your mind. Your own world, the room where you lie, has become its own kind of tea house. The gentle hum of the night outside is your matsuke's. The wind in the pines, the soft weight of your blanket, is the comforting presence of the chai, and your own slow, steady breathing is the only rhythm that matters now. A silent coda of rest. There are no more lessons to learn, no more poetic names to contemplate. There is only the simple, humble, and perfect beauty of this single, quiet moment. Let the stillness steep, let the silence infuse your mind. The day is done. It is time for tranquility.